On the morning of August 8th, 1963, railway workers in Buckinghamshire discovered the impossible. A Royal Mail train traveling from Glasgow to London had been stopped, its engine hijacked, and its cargo vanished. £2.61 million in used banknotes worth £62 million today, stolen in just 15 minutes. The most audacious train robbery in British history. But this wasn't just about money. Train driver Jack Mills was beaten with an iron bar and never fully recovered. He died 7 years later, and his co-driver David Whitby died of a heart attack at age 34. Today, we'll tell you how 15 criminals led by Bruce Reynolds pulled off Britain's greatest heist and why their perfect crime destroyed them all. Picture 1963. Bruce Reynolds is a career criminal from South London, an antique dealer who moonlights as a burglar. He's charming, intelligent, and ambitious, but he's never attempted anything on the scale of what he's planning.
Bruce was a quiet sort of chap who could go to the south of France, cars, mix with company there, and in no time at all find out when they're going out the next people, and then go and turn their place over for jewellery, many thousands of pounds worth. He was really astute thief.
Reynolds has just been released from prison in 1962. He's done small jobs, but he wants something bigger, something that will set him up for life. He assembles his core team: Gordon Goody, Buster Edwards, and Charlie Wilson. These are successful criminals in London's underworld, but they have virtually no experience stopping trains. But Reynolds looked at Britain's railway system with completely different eyes. Every night, traveling post office trains carried millions in cash from Scotland to London. The mail was sorted en route. Security was minimal. And because of a recent bank holiday weekend in Scotland, one particular train would be carrying far more than usual. Usually these trains carried around 300,000 pounds. But on August 8th, 1963, the train would carry 2.3 million pounds, nearly 8 times the normal amount. Reynolds understood something the authorities didn't. The secure, high-value package carriages with alarms and reinforced windows were out for maintenance. The train would be using old reserve carriages. Easy targets. He devised a plan whereby stopping and robbing this train required inside information, expert signal riggers, and a remote hideout. They needed specialists. So Reynolds enlisted another gang called the South Coast Raiders, Tommy Wisby, Bob Welch, and Jim Hussey, who were already accomplished train robbers. The gang grew to 15 men. Each had a role. Each believed they'd be rich within hours. They had no idea how catastrophically wrong it would all go. August 7th, 1963. At 1850, the traveling post office train departs Glasgow Central Station for its overnight journey to London. On board, 72 post office workers sort mail in 12 carriages. In the second carriage from the front sits the prize, sacks containing millions in used banknotes. The gang has rented Leatherslade Farm in Oakley, Buckinghamshire, a remote hideout within 30 minutes of their target location. At 1 a.m. on August 8th, they set off for Sears Crossing between Leighton Buzzard and Cheddington. Their specialist, Roger Cordry, an expert in rigging trackside signals, has done his work. A glove covered the green signal light. A 6-volt battery powered a false red signal. At 3:03 a.m., 58-year-old Jack Mills from Crewe sees the red light and stops the train. His co-driver, 26-year-old David Whitby, climbs down to use the lineside telephone. He discovers the cables have been cut. As he returns, he's overpowered and thrown down the embankment. In the engine cab, Mills puts up a fight. From behind, another gang member strikes him with a kosh, rendering him semi-conscious. The blow fractures his skull. He'll never fully recover. And now the most interesting part. The gang has brought a retired train driver to move the locomotive. But when he climbs into the cab, he realizes this huge diesel train is far more complicated than the local trains he's driven before. He freezes. The plan is falling apart. One of the gang, Ronnie Biggs, whose only role was recruiting the driver, has to rouse the injured Jack Mills to drive the train himself. With a fractured skull and blood running down his face, Mills is forced at gunpoint to drive half a mile to Bridego Bridge. The gang uncouples the front 2 carriages from the rest. In the back 10 carriages, postal workers don't even realize a robbery is happening. But in the front 2, Terrified staff are pushed to one end by masked men in army uniforms and boiler suits. At Bridgo Bridge, a human chain of robbers removes 120 sacks containing 2.5 tons of money. Land Rovers are waiting. The operation takes just 15 minutes. Before leaving, one gang member orders post office staff to stay still for 30 minutes before contacting police. This tactical error gives investigators a critical clue. The hideout must be within 30 minutes drive. Within minutes, the first police radio reports crackle across VHF frequencies. The iconic line is heard, "A robbery has been committed, and you'll never believe it. They've stolen the train." The gang hears this broadcast on their police scanner. They're shocked. They didn't expect authorities to be notified so quickly. They floor the accelerator toward Leatherslade Farm. Once there, they quickly count the cash and divide it into shares. The gang consisted of 17 members who were to receive equal shares, including 2 key informants. They play Monopoly using real stolen banknotes. They celebrate. They believe they've pulled off the perfect crime. They have no idea that fingerprints on the Monopoly board, a ketchup bottle, and food packaging will seal their fate. The robbery netted £2.61 million, equivalent to £62 million in 2023. In 1963 currency, that was about $7 million. At today's exchange rates and inflation, it's worth over $75 million. To understand the scale, £2.6 million in 1963 could buy 1,1300 average British homes. It was more than the annual budget of many small British towns. The weight alone, 2.5 tons of cash, required Land Rovers to transport it. If you stacked the 120 sacks end to end, they'd stretch the length of a football field. The denomination was mostly £1, £5, and £10 notes, old used currency with recorded serial numbers. This made it nearly impossible to spend in large amounts. The gang's biggest problem wasn't getting the money, it was using it without getting caught. If shocked by how this perfect crime became a disaster, like and subscribe for more true crime stories. But now comes the most cynical part. The gang's original plan was to leave the farm on Sunday, giving them 3 days to clean up. But hearing the police radio broadcast, they panicked and decided to leave Friday, the very next day. According to their scanner, police had descriptions of their vehicles. Brian Field, the solicitor's clerk who'd arranged the farm, was supposed to return and burn all evidence. He was paid £10,000. He never did it. Simple arithmetic. The gang stole £2.6 million. Only about £400,000 was recovered from the farm. The rest disappeared, but nobody got to enjoy it. On August 13, 1963, just 5 days after the robbery, a herdsman reported suspicious activity at Leatherslade Farm. Police descended on the property. What they found was a forensic gold mine. Fingerprints on a ketchup bottle and the Monopoly game they'd played with real money. Vehicle tracks, food packaging, sleeping arrangements for 15 men. Within 24 hours, Roger Corddry was arrested. Within a week, Charlie Wilson was arrested and police were closing in on Reynolds, White, James, Edwards, and Biggs. Biggs' fingerprint was found on the ketchup bottle and he was arrested September 4th, 1963. The Flying Squad from Scotland Yard, led by Detective Chief Superintendent Tommy Butler, methodically hunted down every gang member. By March 1964, 11 of the 12 defendants received sentences of 20 to 30 years. The gang received a total of 307 years imprisonment. Those who fled abroad fared no better. Reynolds escaped to Mexico with his wife Angela and son Nick. When money ran out, they moved to Canada, then France. He was arrested in Torquay in November 1968, 5 years after the heist, and sentenced to 25 years. Buster Edwards fled to Mexico, then voluntarily returned in 1966, where he was sentenced to 15 years but served only 9. But the cruelest betrayal was what happened to the money. Police only recovered about 10% of the stolen cash. By 1971, when Britain decimalized its currency, most of the remaining stolen money became worthless, no longer legal tender. Of course, some gang members didn't accept their fate quietly. Ronnie Biggs received 30 years but escaped from Wandsworth Prison in a furniture van just 15 months later. He fled to Brazil via Spain and Australia, returning to the UK only in May 2001, 36 years as a fugitive. Charlie Wilson escaped from prison within a year in an operation that took under 3 minutes. But he couldn't escape his past. He was eventually shot and killed in Spain. The gang's end was universally tragic. Buster Edwards ended up running a flower stall at Waterloo Station. He took his own life in the late 1990s. James Hussey and Thomas Wisby were convicted in 1989 for drug trafficking. Bruce Reynolds, released in 1978, tried legitimate business, but failed. He became a drug trafficker and was jailed again in the 1980s for 3 years. By the 1990s, he was living on income support in a Croydon flat. He died February 28, 2013, at age 81. But the real tragedy belongs to the victims. Jack Mills returned to light duties after partial recovery, retired in 1967, and died in 1970 from leukemia. He never overcame the trauma of the robbery. His family insists the head injury contributed to his early death at age 64. David Whippy died of a heart attack just 2 years after Mills, at only 34 years old. His sister Nancy said he was never the same after the robbery, never married, never had children. In 2014, a locomotive was named Driver Jack Mills at Crew Station, and a plaque was unveiled honoring both men. It took 51 years for the victims to receive official recognition, while the criminals became celebrities. Today, Bridgo Bridge still stands. It was unofficially renamed Train Robbers Bridge, though recent campaigns successfully lobbied Network Rail to restore its original name out of respect for Mills and Whitby. Most modern historians agree the Great Train Robbery was brilliantly planned and executed. But brilliant planning couldn't save them from forensic evidence, informants, or their own greed. Despite the huge amount of money stolen, none of the thieves were able to live happily on their ill-gotten gains. The bulk of the money vanished, spent on luxuries that attracted police attention, given to fences who took massive cuts, or simply lost when Britain changed its currency. Perhaps the gang who stole millions but died poor reminds us that crime doesn't pay. Perhaps the victims who never recovered remind us of the real cost of victimless crimes. The identity of the Ulsterman, the inside informant who provided crucial information, was revealed in 2014 by gang member Gordon Goody, though the man had died years earlier. But that's a completely different story.